Modernism didn't just change how things looked. It changed how corporations think. It changed how systems operate. It changed how we navigated cities. And it changed how brands built trust. And here's the part that's wild. Modernism wasn't just a visual style. It was industrial logic applied to design. And once corporations embraced it, design stopped being just decoration. It became an infrastructure. Let's get into it. In the last episode, we talked about factories, industrialization, mass production, and the moment that marketing suddenly became essential. Companies weren't just making products anymore, they were competing at scale. When you're producing thousands, millions of identical objects, you need efficiency, you need consistency, you need to have systems. Factories ran on standardization. And here's the key shift. The same logic didn't just stay on the factory floor. It moved into design, because if production is standardized, why wouldn't brands be? If a company wants to appear stable, reliable, and scalable, it can't afford visual chaos. And this is where modernist thinking steps in. Modernism wasn't just random minimalism. It was rooted in rationality. Designers were influenced by Bauhaus and Swiss design, two design styles that believed in clarity and function, that structure should drive communication, not unnecessary ornamentation, and no decorative excess, just what is essential. And when corporations saw this approach, it just clicked. Because modernism aligned perfectly with industrial values: efficiency, repetition, control, systemization. Modernism wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It was corporate philosophy made visual. Before we go any further, I need to say something. As a graphic designer, I always physically cringe whenever someone points at something that's contemporary and says, "Oh, how modern." No! Modernism is a historical movement. It has a time period of philosophy, rules, and it doesn't exist in 2026, I'm sorry to say. If something is new right now, the word that you're looking for is contemporary, not modern. Modern does not equal new. Modern is the early to mid 20th century. It is an ideology built on function, reduction, and rational systems. Contemporary equals current. But okay, rant over. But it matters. Because when we're talking about modernism shaping corporate identity, we are talking about a very specific mindset, not just minimal brand trends. Standardization gets a bad reputation today. People hear it and think boring, corporate, soulless. But in the mid-20th century, standardization was revolutionary. Imagine navigating a city where every sign used a different set of typography. Imagine airports without universal symbols. Imagine transportation systems designed purely on aesthetic whim. That would be absolute madness. Modernist designers believe that visual language should be universal, not expressive for the sake of ego. Universal. One of the best examples we have is the signage for the New York City subway system. It was designed by Massimo Vignelli. He applied very strict grids, consistent typography, and a rational system to an incredibly complex transit system. He wasn't just making it cute. It was about making it usable. That mindset, it's usability over decoration. Peak modernism. Here's where things shift dramatically. Before this era, companies had logos, but what they didn't have is identity systems. There was no cohesive visual strategy over every single touch point. Then designers started treating brands like industrial systems. The most famous example, Paul Rand. When he developed identities for companies like IBM and ABC, he wasn't just designing a symbol. He was creating a repeatable, scalable visual language. Everything worked together. Typography, color, layout, application. This is where corporate identity becomes intentional, not decorative, strategic. Modernism gave corporations something extremely powerful: consistency. And consistency builds trust. If factories run on assembly lines, modernist design runs on grids. Swiss designers like Josef Müller-Brockmann really push the ideas that layouts should be mathematically structured. This is where we get things like alignment, hierarchy, precision, a lot of the things that we use today. The grid removes randomness, it removes ego, it creates visual predictability, and predictability feels stable. For corporations expanding globally, that stability was everything. You could open a branch in another country and keep the same visual identity. That is industrial thinking applied to branding. This is where brand guidelines and manuals become serious business. Modernist identity systems were not vague. They were documented. Exact logo spacing, approved color palettes, designated typefaces, and clear usage rules. All of this isn't about limiting creativity. It is all about scalability. When corporations expanded to the global market, they need their identities to survive translation, both culturally and linguistically. Modernism made branding industrial, repeatable, systematic, reliable. Now here's the deeper layer. Modernism looks neutral, but neutrality communicates power. Clean layouts, sans serif typography, it implies rationality. It implies control and authority. When corporations adopted modernist design, they weren't just choosing minimalism. They were choosing to appear logical and dependable. Design became psychological positioning. It wasn't just surface decoration anymore. It was corporate strategy. And before anyone says modernism killed creativity, look at Otto Eicher and his work in the Munich 1972 Olympics. Structured, yes, but also vibrant, strategic, and globally influential. His pictograms helped shape the universal icon systems that we still use till this day. That's not soulless, that's foundational. And of course, no movement dominates forever. By the 1970s and 80s, designers started rebelling. Modernism felt too rigid, too corporate, too impersonal. Postmodernism challenged the grid. Typography became expressive again. And layouts, they became more experimental. But here's what's fascinating. Even when designers rebelled, corporations largely stayed modernist because clarity still works. And consistency, it still builds trust. And systems, they still scale. If you work in branding, marketing, or graphic design today, you are still operating in modernism legacy. Brand kits, modernism. Style guides come from modernism. Grid-based websites, modernism. Minimal corporate logos, you guessed it, modernism. Even contemporary design trends are built on modernism. This is the era when design stopped being surface-level aesthetics. It became an infrastructure, it became strategy. It became part of corporate psychology. Modernism gave designers a seat at the corporate table. It aligned design with industrial thinking. It proved that visual communication wasn't just fluff. It was system building and system thinking. It is scalable structure. And yes, sometimes it did strip away all the warmth. Yes, sometimes it did lean a little too hard into rigidness, but it gave us clarity in a rapidly industrializing, globalizing world. And when we embrace it, critique it, or rebel against it, we are still designing in the systems that it built. But okay guys, that's all I have for you right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe for more videos just like this because I make them every week. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you next time. Bye.